Hi everybody, I'm Wawez, and I'm kind of making this because I am a little crazy and I decided to watch 4 movies from different time periods, and I'm gonna, do a little project on that because this is my project for AP Euros, so time to get to the grind. I am gonna watch 4 movies, each from a different time period. The first time period is the Dark Ages, which is kind of includes the Renaissance, but doesn't really, and this is from 1450 to 1968. Mine's gonna be about Joan of Arc. Then there's gonna be period 2, which is the Scientific Revolution, Absolutism, Enlightenment, the French Revolution, Napoleon, all of that. And I watched Les Miserables for this one. It's not the musical. It's not the musical. Get that in your head. It's not the musical. Then period 3, I watched Oliver Twist. Really good movie. And then in period 4, I watched The Boy in Striped Pajamas. So get to watching, guys. Thanks. So the first movie I watched is The Messenger, Joan of Arc. They have a lot of things they left out, historical inaccuracies, and just bad story all overall. Like, they did really bad. It's horrible. And they started off with a little overview of history, and it didn't go very well because they missed out a lot of names and dates, and they skipped over a bunch as well that was very important. So in the beginning, they were just going to go over some vague, romanticized looking beginning, and then in the actual beginning of the 100 Years' War, which is what Joan of Arc is about, which they hadn't even told us in the beginning. They did not say that this was the 100 Years' War or yada yada. They just kind of went into it, and it started in 1337 and it ended in 1453, and Joan of Arc had a huge impact in trying to finish this war. She was thought of as a French hero because of it, and it all started between a territorial conflict between England and France, and it was about succession issues of the French throne, and it began exactly with Edward III when he invaded Flanders in 1337, and this is what started all the conflicts. Now, at the time that, Charles had taken the throne, Charles VII had taken the throne, it was all because of Joan of Arc, and that's what the story is about. It's starting at the very end of the war in about 1412, which is when Joan of Arc was born. So they missed out a lot of those details in the beginning of the movie, which is fair, but not fair enough because this is a historical film and they gotta get stuff right. And they also didn't specify who half the characters were and who half the cast was. You're just kind of supposed to know that, which is pretty bad. Then, the next thing that I saw is Joan has brown hair, which is inherently wrong, and many sources tell you that Joan actually has brown hair, not blonde hair. And it's shown so much that Joan has blonde hair throughout the entire thing. Blonde hair, blue eyes, pale skin, that's it. But it's going to be very different because her actual stature was all brown hair, in a bob, men's clothing, men's stature, all that. First girl boss, first queen, you know what I mean? Get to it. Then the next scene that comes up is there's this time where she goes to church in the first scene-ish, and Joan goes for a confession. And in the confession, she says that I stole my father's shoes and I gave them to a monk who did not have any shoes to go off of, this poor guy. And the church guy says, well, why would you need forgiveness? And Joan says, oh, well, I want Jesus' forgiveness. And it goes down a little bit of, well, are you doing okay at home? Is everything going fine? And the priest gets to the point where he's like, you don't have to spend your whole life in church, okay? You have a life outside of church as well. And that's what he's implying with his statement. I'm not saying his actual statement, but that's what he implies with his statement. And there is a problem with this, because either this wonderful priest is ahead of his time by a few hundred years, or this priest, the producer forgot to say that the priest actually is part of a time in the medieval ages where they did not believe that people had their own lives yet. Because back then, in about the 1300s to 1400s, early 1400s, they hadn't really had the Renaissance yet, and the Renaissance is what brought the ideas of humanism, which is human-centered thoughts. So prior to that, everyone was going to church, and your only ever goal was to pray, was to make sure that you were with God always, and make sure that you lived so you could go to heaven. You were living your life, so heaven was your end goal. You weren't living your life to just live your life. So that was a big of a problem because he's really ahead of his time. And I would also like to say, throughout the entire movie, everyone had a British accent. It didn't matter if you were French, if you were British, or if you were Joan of Arc, you were all British. There was no distinction. They were all British. The only distinction you get, there's a wall. You wear different armor, and you have bad teeth. And I think that last one's a really nice insult, and I like it. So in the next few scenes, she goes into a little bit of a fit of happiness, maybe even mania, some might say, and she ends up behind a church. And behind that church, she's on her back, and she's like just basking in the sun rays, and she's having her little episode, and she picks up this miraculous sword next to her that somehow appeared next to the church. That's a little weird. Why would a sword just appear next to a church? But I digress. Some things just happen. Makes no sense to me. Doesn't make sense in the story. But next, she picks it up and puts the blade in her hand. I don't know how to feel about that. That's just not right. But what? Then there's a huge time skip because her village gets raided, and this actually happens in her history. Her town, this is a significant part of Joan of Arc's backstory, where her town gets raided, and this is where her initial hate for the English comes from. But she doesn't hate the English, which the movie very much describes she does. She's like, I can't forgive them. Why can't I forgive them? My God. And I know that they're embellishing the story a bit here, but I think that part was actually one of the better parts of the movie, where they're embellishing that part of the story. It adds more to Joan of Arc's character. Then she makes it to the king, and this is where it got a little bit confusing for me personally, because first of all, they didn't tell us that there was a 6-year time skip. Yeah, there was a 6-year time skip there, because in real life, in actual history, Joan of Arc went to meet the king when she was 16. And she went twice. She did not only go once. And in this movie, she only went once. Now, the second time she went is when she was actually successful. And she didn't even meet the king. She only met the king the second time. The first time, she only met this guy, and his name was Robert de Baudricourt, or however you say that. I don't know how to say it. I'll probably put the text on the screen because I have no idea how to say that word. I'm not French. So this guy, first time he met her when she was 16. He went like, you are a 16-year-old woman trying to fight the English army. I don't believe you. You should go back home. So he sent her on her way. And then when she was 17, in January of 1429, she brought herself right back to him and was like, hey, I have a bunch of accomplishments now. I have the people's respect. I'm known for my firmness, my quiet firmness. I'm known for my piety. I have respect of the entire country, basically. Just let me in at this point, pal. And he did, and he brought her to the king, and she's like, I'm going to get you on that throne. And that's what she wanted to say to him. And then when she got to the king, he did a test on her because he wouldn't believe that she was from God's hand. And this coincides with what goes on in the film. So I want to reiterate that the first part that I was talking about, where she went twice to see the king, she did not even go through that military guy the first time. She actually went through. In this movie, she didn't go twice. She only went once, and then she sent a letter to the king. And then she just arrived at the king's door, which is a long way without horses, by the way. If she walked all that, she's crazy. So she arrives in the movie, and there's a party. And in the party, there is no king present at the seat. There's a guy there, and she knows it's just a guy, and it's a guy in disguise as the king. Because the king wanted to play a test on Joan to make sure that she was actually sent by God and that she could detect him. And in real life, this actually happened, and he did that test, and she found him very easily. And the same thing happened in this one. Now, I want to make it known that she cries almost every other scene. Maybe not even every other scene, almost every scene that something slightly emotionally impactful happens. She cries, she begs, she's angry, she's sad. It's visceral emotions. And we can't really verify if she's always been like that. But personally, based on her actions and based on how many people have described her in history, Joan is not an angry, impulsive person. Joan literally is described to have quiet firmness. So I want to make it known that this whole movie, she's been angry, she's yelled and screamed, and it's not been good. As for her character, it makes you almost resent her. At least I resented her because of how she looked and acted and did the way things she did. Now, I also want to make it known that she had cut her hair into a bob way before she did in the movie. She cut her hair in a bob after the king had allowed her to go fight the English, which did not happen in the actual thing. So she had actually had the bob when she was being questioned at the trial, which is what happened next. So the king actually placed some trials on her to see if she was furthermore not tainted by the devil, and she was a virgin. She was literally answering all of their questions, and she had a very, very big firmness to her. Like, she would not budge in some questions. She was like, we're gonna move places, and if you guys still don't understand, then we're gonna move places again, and you're gonna understand next time, because I can only answer what God tells me. And she was honestly just hitting the mark on everything. Like, she was answering those questions, she was getting through it. But the real thing that did not survive was the examinations. We don't know what happened during the trials, and we don't know what happened during the examinations because those documents never survived. So all the trials that you see in the movie are actually embellished. They were made up. They never happened. The questions, we don't know what those questions were. And in fact, in the movie, it's a skippable scene, so they only added that for dramatic effect. And if you implied it, I believe it would have been much more powerful. But you know what? It's a movie that came out in 1999, so I can't complain. That is like 25 years ago. I'm gonna let it go. So there is a lot of things that are wrong, and one of them is that when she immediately got, after the examinations, she was basically home free, and she wanted 3 things done, I believe. She wanted a letter, she wanted new clothes, she wanted a sword, armor, a horse. That's more than 3 things, I apologize. And the last thing she wanted was a banner to be made for her. Now, this banner is something that she actually, I believe, had made a little bit later, and she did have it for the Battle of Orleans, but she most likely had not asked for it so early, but if she did, then you did good on it, movie, because banners do take a long time to make. So then there was her fateful meeting as they were going out to meet the English, their fateful meeting where Jean meets Duc hold on, I'm gonna get it, Duc d'Alençon. I think I'm really bad at French. I don't speak French. Guys, forgive me. So Joan meets Duc d'Alençon. Yeah. And this guy is not Charles's stepbrother. I want to make that known. This guy is not Charles's stepbrother. And if anything, he was actually just a relative, and that is what a lot of sources said. And I believe that whole stepbrother thing was kind of embellished because, for some reason as well, that I kind of glossed over earlier, because I thought it wasn't as big of a thing, Charles's stepmother never was that much of an important character throughout the entire time. Charles's stepmother wasn't there for a majority of the time where she was actually there. She was probably on the sidelines watching everything happen. She's not a direct player in any of this. In fact, women back then weren't acting like Joan of Arc. I want to make that known. Women are not as cool as Joan of Arc during this time. She broke all gender norms of the time. She became a soldier. She wore men's clothes. She did not get married. She literally made herself a place in the army. She led battalions like freak Mulan, because she's not even a real story. She's a myth that was created from a poem. Joan of Arc is real, and she broke everything about gender norms. Like, Joan of Arc should get her own animated movie because of that. Like, that's incredible. So, that was a bit of a side tangent, and still important regardless, but this is also important that Charles' stepbrother was not actually there, and his stepmother was never that important in the story. He doesn't have any emotional connection or anything like that. He just made those decisions because of his advisors. And Joan, which was also became one of his advisors, basically. So, when she gets to the town where they have to go for, their first battle, Joan has become super angry and nervous and frightened and scared that all these people love her. And it was not inherently shown why they love her, so if you didn't do research into Joan of Arc, you don't understand why all these people just start crowding her all of a sudden because she's just a woman who likes God or something. Like, it's very sudden, and there's no evidence to back up why all these people like her. She becomes angry, she starts yelling at people, and it's really, really weird. When what actually happens is that she already knew she was popular. She had made herself a name on her second way to get to meet the king. She already spread the word about herself, and in fact, it's probably well known at this time that she was really popular. So she wouldn't have had such a fright upon seeing all these people. In fact, she shouldn't have ever had a fright because she's a woman of God, and this is actually a good thing for her. Anyways, she's known to be really smart as well in history, and I feel like they could have played up on that a little bit. And it's also widely considered, I'm going to say it again, that she cut her hair before she entered the army. And this is important as well because she had this whole scene about transformation, like, all these men think it's just because a woman's leading them that they can't do it. So she cuts off all her hair and she's like, yeah, I did that. And it's giving a bit of pick-me-girl, but, and also she got it kind of ugly, but, it's okay. She's one of the men now, I guess. So, Joan did have this huge, amazing, monumental moment, by the way, it's pretty cool, where she saw a vision of French blood being spilled, and she was inspired one day to just go out and fight the English. And I'm not sure how she rallied the other men, but in this version, she saw, people, like, just dying. And she decided, you know what, I think that we gotta save them. Now, in this one, they kind of distorted the history, because one of her commanders under her wasn't one of the people that sent the command under her nose because she's a woman. They just added that because they could. It was actually another skirmish that had already happened prior to, them arriving to the battalion, in the town. And so all the soldiers got up and started fighting with them. In the original time, Joan of Arc never had anything to criticize about her fellow commander. But then in this version, it's actually one of her commanders that sends out their men. And now that brings a lot of complications because, first of all, how do they have that many men? And second of all, why is there this whole tension thing happening when the real story is much more tense and incredible? You're just downplaying Joan at this point, which is really sad. And not only that, something really important that the movie missed out on, that's incredible that they should have added, is that Joan saw her brothers during all of the next battles. Joan was with her brothers Pierre, and I believe the other one is Jean, but we will see. So, while, she was doing all this, she's consistently angry, horribly narcissistic, and she keeps demanding the impossible out of the soldiers. Now, this is what happened in real life. She demanded impossible out of the soldiers, but she wasn't angry, and she wasn't narcissistic, and she wasn't like, you can't question me because I am God. That's essentially what she's saying. Because I'm the messenger of God, therefore I'm God, therefore you can't, say anything to me, right? Right? No. Second of all, no. First of all, no. And third of all, no. She never did that, and she, first of all, would never say that. If you are, I think this producer is actually atheist, because if you were the slightest bit religious, you would know that even upon, glancing at the Bible, which I know that, by the way, that they have listened to most likely many sermons, you can't say you're God. You can't say you are God. I know that there might be some, mistranslation on some religions, but I know for a fact that most religions, in fact, don't really think that people can be on the same wavelength as God. No, if you say you are, you're already committing basically sin at that point. Why would you do that? It's not something that it's not, it baffles me. It actually baffles me when I watched this. I was flabbergasted. I don't have a flabbergasted sprite, so if you just see me looking slightly annoyed, that's because I could only draw 5 things. I'm sorry. I don't have that much time, guys. I'm a high school student. It's the end of the year, but I drew it when I was busy, so just, come on, guys, cut me some slack. And there was the battle, obviously, that happened, and she was on her way up this. So she had first two battles. She battled 2 different small, what is it, encampments. She battled in 2 small encampments, and she had absolute total victory over the English. And then the English took over something that starts with a T and ends with an ES. So that was a very, very important one, where they took over this extremely important stronghold. And this one, I believe, is called, hold on a moment, friends, I believe it is called, I'm probably gonna cut all this out because come on, show it to me, where is it? It's called, no, that's the next part, where I literally wrote it down. Why past, there it is. Les Torres. I'm gonna say it in an English accent because therefore I'm against the French now. I'm gonna say it in an English accent because I have no idea what I'm saying. So Les Torres. I'm never gonna say it again because obviously I'm committing many mass crimes by saying it like the way I am. Les Torres, something like that. So that was a big stronghold that was killed. Not killed, but big stronghold that was taken over by the French from the English, and it was an incredible battle, which was beneficial to almost everyone in the French side, not the English. And the French took it over, but during that battle, it was a very important part of Joan's history, apparently in this movie, that they embellished a lot, that Joan got shot with an arrow, most likely an arrow at the time, but she got injured at the time of the battle. She went out for a bit, and was like, I need to be with my soldiers. So she came rushing back, and continued to battle with them despite being injured. Now, this is incredible in history. She is so cool for doing that. She is incredible for doing that. And so this injury is not only incredibly awesome that she went back to the battle despite being injured, but she's perseverant, and that should have been added into the movie. It was horribly done that she became injured, taken completely off the battlefield, and 6 soldiers, plus the commanders, which should have been in the fight, by the way. Like, if you're in the middle of a battle, don't take away your best fighter just because one of you guys is injured. And then Joan acted completely irresponsibly, tore it out of her chest, and screamed and cried and angered and punched, and she was like a petulant child throughout that scene. And everyone apparently loved her because she's Joan of Arc. I don't understand that scene. The movie is so annoying when it's like, actually everybody loves Joan of Arc. You never showed us why they would love her. She's annoying as freak. Just seeing these scenes through the screen actually made me have to take several breaks while I was listening to this. I had to take so many breaks while watching this movie because I had so much to write. If I show you guys my document, you guys will be surprised in how much I had just to say on several points in this movie. It's incredible. It's incredible. But if they actually added the historical value of the injury where she went out and came back in, you could show resilience, they could show why the soldiers thought of her as so influential, and it was also taking away her huge mistake. And taking that away is in itself another huge mistake. Joan is incredible for the feats that she was able to accomplish during all this time. By taking away the impact of that injury, you're also taking away the impact of her influence among the soldiers. If that happened in the actual movie, I would understand why all the soldiers thought highly of Joan because of this whole thing that happened. Not a lot of soldiers can get like a huge injury and then come right back to battle to inspire soldiers again. That's incredible. And there's also, I don't know if I showed it on screen, there was this horrible English gag where it said, hello, carved into a cannonball, and it is so stupid. You are literally in French territory, make French jokes. It's not hard. There are so many French jokes you can make. You did not have to just go dip into English and do the bare minimum. This story, guys, this story is really getting me. And that was one of the many gags throughout the movie that I was not impressed by. In fact, earlier in the movie, when I skipped over it because it's a very sad scene where, and surprisingly graphic, where Joan witnesses her sister get violently killed in front of her and then sexually assaulted, and it is incredibly sad, but then they make a joke about it in the movie. It's like not even implied to be a scene. They deliberately tried to make you have a laugh out of the scene. Or like try to, like, they most likely added that to, elevate the mood. But that just didn't happen. Like, if something like that happens in a movie, you can't just say, haha, hee, she just got sexually assaulted after I stabbed her in the abdomen. That's so funny and goofy and silly. Now can you guys come over and do the same? What? No way, bro just did that. No way, that just happened. You can't just do that. No. Then, later in the battle, I'm going to go back to the Orleans battle. So, she actually won the Orleans battle, and that somehow miraculously happened in the movie, despite having everything against her, whoa. And in history it happened, and she really did persevere. But later, the English were actually gathering to leave, because they were horribly outmatched. And for some reason, the movie made it into a conflict where Joan talked to the other soldiers and went like, please, don't kill us. We're just lonely little French people. Which is what she should have said if you were going to make a freaking gag at everything. But I digress. She had said that, and then they left, but that's not what happened. They were actually on their way to leave, and all of the commanders were like, let's go after them. If we kill them now, then they won't be a nuisance later. And Joan was like, no, we're not killing them. It's a Sunday. Go to Mass. That was so cool of her. I would have loved to meet Joan of Arc, actually. I would have loved to meet Joan of Arc. She just commanded every man in the entire royal army to stay because they have to pray to God. Let's freaking go. Like, I know not everyone's, like, a God person nowadays, and I'm not saying everyone should be, but all of these men listened to her while she said all of that. That's incredible. And yet again, she's undermined in the movie because for some reason they can't do anything right. So, it's whatever, I guess. Now, after her initial wins, Joan had won a lot more battles afterwards that the movie did not cover, despite their importance to her character and her development as a person. And I put down a huge quote of Britannica, deciding that I was just going to say it all. And I'm not going to do that, but she did a lot of other things. Like, she cleared out the English out of Loire River. I'm sorry, guys, I'm not even French. I'm not French. And then she met Duc d'Alençon, and who had been the lieutenant general of the French armies, and together they took a town and an important bridge. Then they attacked the Beaugency? Whereupon the English retreated to the castle, and then the opposition of Dauphin and his advisor, which I hate his advisor, by the way, kind of a creep, Georges de la Tremoille. You know what? I'm glad I can't say her name right. You're such a. Anyways, I can't say that because it's a bad thing to say. Amen. And despite the reserve of Alençon, Joan and the court making him swear fidelity, she accepted his help, and shortly therefore they went after the castle of Beaugency. I think that's how Beaugency, and they surrendered. French and English armies came to the city called Patay, and on June 18th of 1429, yada yada yada, she had a lot more victories. Yippee! We love you, Joan of Arc. And so the argument between Joan of Arc and Charles later in the movie, where she is trying to take over Paris like they always wanted, and Charles is like, well, it's a time that we are trying to negotiate, which, well, I mean, that's fair, that's what happened. He did want to call off all the, our French armies and stuff against the English because he wanted negotiations instead of, all this needed violence, which takes a lot of money, so that's fair. But then, for some reason, they make a plot point where his stepmother is in there, and his stepmother's behind the scenes, and it's a whole bunch of nothing. It's a whole bunch of nothing. Bunch of pooey. So they have this huge argument while he's in his bathtub with his quote-unquote wife. I don't know why, but they're naked, and Joan just comes in, says all of her stuff, yells and screams, and stomps her foot like she's a child, and Charles is like, I don't trust you with the army, and not even that, I need to make sure my people are safe, so we're gonna try to do negotiations. And Joan is visibly upset because Joan is Joan in this movie, and Joan is stupid, and instead of doing what she originally does, and goes on a walk with Charles, and on that walk she literally inspires him to say, hey, we need to take over Paris, France, because it is important to not only our people, but it is perfect for this war. It needs to happen. And Charles is like, this is the last time I'm going against my advisor, because you're actually kind of cool, Joan of Arc. And that's not exactly what happens, because we don't have the exact tellings of what she did. That's essentially what she said. In this version, she just ends up getting the king's favor somehow. It's weird. I don't know. They portray her as such an impatient brat in the movie, and they miss on so many things. It's very uncalled for, and I don't think they did a very good job throughout the entire movie. It's generally very bad. So they missed out on a great opportunity once again to show mature Joan of Arc that she's a strong, independent woman, and the movie portrays her as a really impatient brat and demanding person that's kind of narcissistic, which is really sad. So they also never explicitly say it, but there's this guy that shows up with her in the beginning of the movie, and his name is D'Aulon, or D'Aulon, I hate saying that, and he becomes Joan's squire. And now this is never explicitly said in the movie because, I don't know, I think they wanted him to be a love interest, maybe? Because he suddenly, just upon meeting her in the first maybe 30 minutes of his life, falls in love, maybe, and cares for her in any circumstance. You see her yelling, Jean, 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 like every sentence. Every time she goes on the battlefield, he's like, Jean, stop! Jean, Jean, stop! You're endangering yourself, it's a war! You're a woman! Get off the battlefield! Like, oh my god. She's reckless in the movie, that's for sure, but she's reckless all the time. You gotta get used to it, okay? Because this is a bad character. Oh my god, this movie's so annoying. It's so annoying. Even thinking about this movie is really, getting on my nerves. Oh my god, I really hate this movie, and I believe no one should watch it. There's some people who have, nostalgia with it. Don't listen to this nostalgia-baited people. It's a horrible, horrible movie. Make fun of it when you have the chance. Just make fun of it, okay? I'd rather this movie have emotional damage rather than physical damage, so just do it. Make fun of the movie. Now, actually, the next parts of the movie are the trials that she went through after she was captured by the English, and these are a little important, but, I mean, it's very important to history, and I will probably go over them, but the problem that does happen in the story is that a lot of it is just in a different place, at a different time. She's acting different, she's done nothing, she expects the king to do something for her, the king does nothing, that was a big one, and real big stuff that happens in the trial is this. So she's taken with her her two brothers, who have been fighting with her this whole time that they did not state in the movie, just wanted to say that, and she was captured, not because she was locked out of a town, but because she was at the back of her retreating army and they unmounted her and she was not able to get back on her horse. That's how they took her. Then she was taken by the French in Burgundy to the English. And she was taken with her two brothers. I cannot state it enough that her brothers were present throughout, or should have been present throughout this movie. They missed out on the entirety of the point, okay? The point of her brothers being there with her. Incredible how stupid they are. Now, when she was actually captured, she asked the king, and Charles had made no forward stuff to save Joan. against his better judgment, which he should have because Joan literally did everything for him, and he was working towards a truce with the Duke of Burgundy, so that's probably why he, didn't do anything. Now, she was treated well in Capture, but she was distressed over the war, so she actually she jumped out of windows, she did everything she could to escape so that she could help with the war, but it never worked because obviously she's dead now. Well, it's been 800 years since she's been alive, so, she would be dead, but she died a little early for my liking. She was moved before a bunch towards the trial dates, she was moved a bunch, and then at the time of her trial, she was also moved a lot between a bunch of castles because there's a bunch of people and theologists of Paris that wanted to, go after her. And so the theologists of Paris thought she was a heretic because of all of her things that she said. And all of the charges were really based upon bias. I think they had 75 charges before they narrowed it down to the last 12 charges, and most of them were just theological stuff. She didn't really commit anything that wasn't implied by war. So they're just kind of killing her because they can and they don't like her. Nice job, buddy. Now, this is real, this happened in history, but I'm kind of judging, okay? Duke of Burgundy, I'm kind of judging. Now, all of her time in prison wasn't bad, but at the time of her execution, she was burned at the stake because she's a witch. And that's the end of her story. In the actual film, I could not bear to watch any more of it, so I decided to summarize the ending for myself. So she is in captivity, she has this emotional scene with some people in front of her, and then she gets burned at the stake. What a wonderful scene. I was waiting for that to happen the whole movie. That was what made me happy. Anyways, that's the end of The Messenger, Joan of Arc. The name is cool, the story is not. Don't watch it, it's a 0 out of 10. Thanks, guys. Now on to the next movie. Okay, I also have some questions I need to answer. I don't need to answer, but I want to answer because they're really interesting questions and they're good. So some of the questions that was given to me by my wonderful teacher who's watching this right now, thank you a bunch, Miss Shane, for giving me questions to answer. Do you believe this film is a good source of history? Why not? This film is not a good source of history. I 0 out of 10 recommend it for anyone to watch, not only to watch, but to gain historical beliefs about Joan of Arc from. It's wrong at almost every turn and skips very important things about her person and her character and her life and her husband, and not her husband, she never got married, and her children, she never had children. I don't know what I'm saying, I'm kind of blabbering on about, but they missed a lot about her family, about major points in her life, about a lot of things. They embellished the story where they could, and they created this weird friendship between her and the other generals when it never happened. So I want to say this movie is really bad, and it is not historically accurate in any sense of the word. Were these characters based on real people? Yes. And are they historically accurate? No. I think I already iterated this enough, so I won't expand. Were there any real events, battles, revolutions, war, laws, etc. portrayed, and are they historically accurate? None of them are. In fact, a lot of the battles were kind of historically accurate, but not really. When they lined up at some point to look at each other and they just ran at each other, that was historically accurate for the time, especially when guns were made. This was the original point of battle, so when guns were created, they kind of just stood in a line and shot each other. It was really funny. But back then, they didn't have any guns, so they kind of just followed weapons and knives and shields and more armor and chainmail and all that. So while all that's happening, they kind of just run at each other in lines, and I think that's perfect the way that they did it in the movie. That was accurate, but that was probably the only accurate thing they did. All the real events were not portrayed right. The trial at the end, the beheading of her, all of that. Very bad. What seems to be accurate and inaccurate in the film overall? Nothing. Costuming was okay. It's not the best, in my opinion. It's just girl, boy, armor, some different armor. I liked the set. The set was nice. It was kind of accurate at the time. And I also really appreciated when she was in her husband. Why do I keep saying husband? She never had a husband. She went to her uncle and aunt's house, and they were married, obviously, and that's where probably the husband's coming from. And they had a wagon, and that wagon looked like it was nicely handmade. And the house was looking very structurally accurate, and very dirty, which is good. I like the way everything was set on there. Now, language, not doing too well. Culture, I guess. Like, the food, maybe. No, we didn't even get to see the food. Is the film... the only thing that they probably got right is the food, and I didn't even get to see it. That's really funny. Is the film for entertainment purposes, or is it really trying to share the historical period? What gives that impression? Explain fully. Now, I've said this a lot, but this does not share anything historically accurate or to her character or to anything. This is completely for entertainment purposes, and they're really just ripping her off the name so then more people will watch it. It's just that bad. And the impression, if you look at any of the other responses to my questions, the impression is that everything they did is wrong, and they most likely did not put the effort to make it right because the whole movie was made, so it gained money. That was it. Okay, that's the last question, and this movie, I will say, is not good, at all, and I want to make it known that it deserves to be made good, because her story, Joan of Arc, is incredible, and I think she deserves a lot more than what she's getting from modern day history. Anyways, we're going to move on to the next movie, like I said previously. Now, the next movie, I also don't know how to say, so we're going to pull it up on Google, because I have been trying for the last, I don't know how long, to try and say this right, and I can't do it. I cannot do it. Text-to-speech. Hold on, I think I have a text-to-speech on my computer. We're figuring this out right now. Anyways, I don't think I have it, but it's called Les Miserables, or The Miserable People, The Miserables. Les Miserables, Miserables. Anyways, whatever it's called, it's a really good movie. I really recommend it. And this movie was actually a book originally, and it was written by Victor Hugo and was published in 1862. Now, this is actually a really important thing that you have to remember when you're watching this movie, because this guy was alive during the time of the movie, and it is advertised as part of the French Revolution, which is completely not true, because the French Revolution was in the 1700s, not the 1800s, and this sort of conflict is actually based off of the 1932 conflict that happened, and it's not even really a conflict, it's a revolt that happened in France because of political problems, because France is never politically stable. Let's go France. And he lived in France. Victor Hugo was there to witness all this stuff happen, so he knows firsthand what went on. Now, the movie is incredible, first of all. The set is extremely good, and everything has a good grasp on what's happening. The movie is set really well. Clothing is incredible. And it was such a juxtaposition from the last movie I watched that I was actually so happy and elated that it became my new favorite movie, like, of the time. It was amazing. It was so good. Oh man, I was saved from the grasps of bad movies. Oh my goodness. So, in the movie, it shows that this guy named Jean Valjean is a criminal. He's a convict. He's this guy who got in trouble once because he was stealing because he was poor, and he just kept stealing because he's a criminal now and he doesn't have any place to go. So they put him in chains for 20 years, and when he got out on parole, which I don't believe they had back then, we're actually going to do a quick fact-checking. Hold on. Okay, never mind. They had it at the time, and I'm just a bit of a fool, but it's okay. You can pardon me. I'm fine. Okay? So, yeah, I just adjusted myself in my chair. It's been a while. I've been sitting down for a while. I have an injury. I need to move around, guys. I need to move around. Anyways, I'm recording this on my phone, so it's picking up everything I do, no matter how much I do it. You probably just heard that. Anyways, this movie does an amazing, incredible job at just making sure that this movie keeps you immersed in time, in the place, and everything about it. It's really good. And in the movie, this guy, Jean Valjean, tries stealing from this priest, and the priest is incredibly kind to him and lets him go off with the stolen goods and money. And the priest says that from now on, you are absolved of your sins, because I have bought your soul from the devil. And I thought that was a really sweet line. And then Jean Valjean was like, I promise, after this, I'm going to be a good person. And he is, because there's this guy who becomes the inspector of police, and he has to talk to Mayor of Vigo, or the Majestic Mayor, I think. I'm not French, guys. I can't say it right. And this guy, his name is something incredibly French. I'm going to search it up actually right now because I need to know what this man's name is. It's on the tip of my tongue. I swear it's Robert or Vincent or something like that. Okay, turns out Javert is the guy who's the main villain. He's the inspector, and he's basically a detective. So it's detective, again, versus criminal. Whoa, very big thing back at the time, actually. This is a popular trope, especially with Sherlock Holmes. And I'm forgetting a lot of names. I'm forgetting Sherlock Holmes' deputy? Sidekick? Something like that. Anyways, so this movie, did a really good job. They had a reinstatement in 2007, or 2012, I believe, which was a new show, but that one did horribly at the job, and I believe that the really good one is this one. I haven't seen the musical, and I know the original novel is probably amazing, but this movie did also an amazing job at portraying everything that happened in the book. I liked it. It's really good. And not only that, they were true to everything that happened. They were true to set, they were true to time period, to clothes, to acting, even language. I'm proud of them for using proper language throughout the entire movie. And they had a very nice French accent, which is very good. I mean, they still couldn't keep it totally French, which I guess is fair, and I would have preferred it if it had like a continuous French accent for everybody, but it's okay. I can let it slide this time because at least it wasn't British, English, American, French sometimes, maybe English. Like, it's bad. And the last movie was so bad. And in this movie, they did a very good job keeping everything consistent, which made me feel like it was a different language but in English, and that's pretty cool. I liked that. Set timing for food was also incredible, and money. Oh, about the money. And I'm going to skip to the very end of the movie when I'm talking about this, because this is when the banknotes come up. Now, there's banknotes, and then there's checks. So, the difference between the two of them is that banknotes were very popular at the time, so then they could carry money on your person, a lot of money, and then withdraw it if you needed it. But then, paper money became very popular in, I'll let you guess, 1700s, 16. It became popular a lot before that, and actually, I believe paper money was actually conceived in 2000 BCE, I believe, in China. So it's been around for a really long time. It's not just an American thing that came up in the 1700s. In fact, this banknote that I'm pulling up right now is from 1652. So it's been around for a while, and I would also like to make it known that this banknote, or this dollar, which is actually $20, was what it looked like at the time. And the dollars he pulled out in the movie are green. They are green. They are regularly green. And the only thing I actually had to say about this movie is small twists, like small things that I needed to make sure were known to the people. For example, when he's about to kill Javert at the end of the movie, he actually uses a switchblade, which was not invented until 1897. Smiley face. And I don't know why I included that, because it's not needed. But that's because I couldn't really find anything about this movie that needed serious critiquing. Yes, it's not a real story, and it didn't have real people in it. So therefore, they didn't need to abide by a lot of stuff. There wasn't, like, strict things that needed to be done. But for the time, for the characters, everything kind of just fits in place. The mystery, the action, all of it. It makes sense for the time period, and it made me happy. There was a bunch of stuff about women in the earlier part and their place in history at the time of the poor, in Les Miserables, or however you say it. So women at the time really had to make a living off of either being married to the rich or selling yourself to men. And that one is the unfortunate fate of this one woman in the show. I don't believe, or maybe, I never written down and I don't remember, but I don't believe we learned this woman's name. She has a child that was born out of wedlock, and she gets fired from her job at the factory where the mayor of Vigo and Jean Valjean owns. So Jean Valjean fires her because he is busy and he couldn't look at her documents and her backstory. So she has to suffer a lot. She's basically dying on the streets because of being fired and not having a stable job. So she sells herself to men, she can't pay for rent, she gets cold, and eventually she actually dies. And Jean Valjean feels very guilty. And at the same time, Javert is finding out that Jean Valjean is actually Jean Valjean that's a convicted convict. And he's kind of just roaming free. And for some reason, Javert hates this guy to his guts and decides, I'm going to track you down and I'm going to make sure you, my friend, are going to jail for some reason. This guy's really funny. And there was some crazy scenes throughout this whole movie that sometimes are embellishing regular physics. Like, it doesn't have to do with history, you're just embellishing physics. But I just want to say, the way that things were executed by Jean Valjean, by Javert, and everything else is made by Victor Hugo and is advanced for the time. Like, localizing police, making sure areas are secure, personally investigating, having, like, spies and stuff. It's advanced. It's not so advanced for the time because it was made in the 1800s, all that crime and praise. But it is incredibly smart of Victor Hugo to do all of this. Now, there are some nitpicks I had for the movie. Like, this one pencil sharpener wasn't made until 1837. It would not have had an impact. And pencil sharpeners weren't standardized, and is not patented until 1820. Like, I have some weird stuff here that I found in the movie that just isn't accurate. But that's really small things that if you were watching the movie because you were watching the movie, you wouldn't even notice. I was noticing it because I was trying to find something that I could critique. But I couldn't find anything, really. It was incredible the entire way through. And the same thing goes for the next two movies. They're all made by people who went through all of this stuff. They have first-hand experience, and I can't refute them because then I'm getting a little ahead of myself there. I can't go against the guy who's literally part of the thing, you know what I mean? I mean, there's internal bias, but this is really well made. So there's if you're uncomfortable, skip to the time on the screen. But there was a sexual assault scene in the movie. There's several, actually, and it is treated with the graveness it deserves. That's one thing. It's also very sad and incredibly depressing to know that this happens a lot in history, and especially to this woman who was basically dying because she had to get money for her child. And her child's name is Cosette. And Jean Valjean makes a vow to take care of the child for the mother, because the people who were taking care of her were heavily abusive, and they were using her for basically like slave labor as a child. It was very sad. So then they live in Paris, because they're running away from Javert, this stupid guy. And on their way out from Javert, they make it to France, and they live in this nun's house. And Cosette doesn't want to get sworn in as a nun, because she wants to meet men, and she wants to go outside into the real world. When can I go into the real world? Like Pinocchio in that one. When can I go into the real world? That was really funny. Anyway, so she wanted to see all these guys, and she eventually falls in love with this revolutionary, and this is where the actual part that comes up in 1832, where, guess what? She, the little daughter, falls in love with this revolutionary, and he's mad about this new government, about this new stuff happening in France. So they have this whole revolution happening, and Jean Valjean just wants his daughter to be happy. So he goes through thick and thin to make sure his daughter gets what she has to be happy. She gets her future husband, Marquis, and he's about to be imprisoned, but then Jean Valjean goes to prison in his place. And at the very end of the movie, and this is, I don't know how, but it really impacted me, that Javert sees Jean Valjean as finally a good person after everything. And Javert, he drowns himself in the river outside of this one thing, and then the movie ends because he says, "Now you're free, Jean." And then he doesn't swim up and he dies in the river. And what's so incredible about this is the entire movie, Javert acts against criminals because of their history and because of their past and not their presence. And the whole movie was the juxtaposition of ideals, where Valjean is consistently and constantly forgiving, and he is heavily within his morals. He doesn't let anything cross his morals. He doesn't hit to kill. He doesn't hit because he has to, because he wants to. He hits because he has to, and he doesn't do anything out of the pleasure of doing it. He does it because he believes it is right, and I think that is an incredible way to live. And everyone should be a little bit more like Valjean. Except for hitting his daughter. I don't know how to feel about that one, but everything else is pretty cool. Am I right or am I right? Don't laugh at that. And Valjean has a bunch of bias against him because of his system. And the first time he felt kindness at the beginning of the movie really impacted him for the rest of the movie. And that shows the difference between kindness and bias and just straight up hate crimes. Like, but yeah, there. So that was essentially all I had for this movie. It was incredible. It was amazing. And I was awestruck by everything in the movie. It was so good. So I'm going to answer those few questions that we had in the beginning for the other movie we did. So this one is, do you believe this film is a good source of history? I do, actually. And I think this because the story embellishes little on some things. Yes, the actual, the story itself centers around Valjean, but the history around the events is accurate. It's what happened. And Valjean's story isn't real. It's a fictitious historical fiction. And it's all based on real events. So the events in the background are real. Just don't analyze Valjean and his effect and Javert's effect, because they're both fictional. But the revolution was real, and they're historically accurate. There was no historically accurate people to analyze, and then there were real events. And I just said about the real event, it's 1832. It was really good because that actually happened. There was a barricade around this area, and there was shooting. Revolutionaries were shot. Eventually, they were lined up and shot. Marquis getting saved never happened. That's not real. But the revolution did end the way it did. It's very sad. The French are really ruthless people, huh? And this film was 100% made for. This film was 100% made for entertainment. That's for sure. But I really do think that you could also use this to kind of, very minimally, use it to kind of get over the historical period, which is very nice. There is costuming, language, culture, everything. It's incredibly accurate. So yeah, that's my really good evaluation of this. It's a very good story. I think they went over everything very nicely. Interesting, it's amazing, it's awesome. You can see the way Valjean redeems himself throughout the movie. It's incredible. So yeah, okay, moving on to the next one, guys. Time to watch Oliver Twist. So, Oliver Twist, I watched the 2005 one. Specifically, the 2005 one. Do not watch any of the other ones. This one, I also heavily recommend. It's so good. I'm not going to go over the movie so much because there is just a bunch of things that I wanted to add on to about the set, about the time, the culture, the period, and everything they got right about the 1800s. So, this is around set the early 1800s like the previous movie, and it is incredibly accurate to everything. The orphan houses, orphan workers, child working, factories which are sickly and old and claustrophobic, and the real factories, if you look at pictures, they look like they're comparable. They look really similar, which is great because they really did show what happened. And the author was Dickens, and I don't like this guy. The author is a bad dude because he's a little racist and he hates Jewish people. So Fagin, one of the villains, is unfortunately a victim of the author's bias. He is a Jewish man who has a hook nose, all of that, and apparently the whole hook nose thing comes from him because they villainize people with hook noses, make him look ugly and disgusting, and it's supposed to mimic his lineage as a Jewish person and make him look scarier because of it. And it's really sad that happens, and I hate you, Dickinson, for doing that because Jewish people are nice and they're sweet, and I appreciate them a lot for being the way that they are and fighting for the things they do. So, F you, Dickinson, you took a fat L. oh man. Anyways, in the beginning of the film, when he goes to the factory and he asks for more, I like the comedy in this film. I think they put it off into, instead of being romanticized or they make jokes in the wrong places, they make the right amount of jokes with visual gags, with gags with the people, with bias and all of that. In one shot, there is a juxtaposition where there is this really fat guard that says, "He asked for more," regarding the food. And all of these rich people right in front of him are like, "He asked for more? This sick, ugly child that's thin and about to die from starvation asked for more?" And all of these, 8 people in front of him are just looking at a table filled to the brim with fruits and meats and vegetables and everything any person could ask for. And it's showing the juxtaposition between the rich people and the poor people. And just like the previous movie, and kind of, very slightly the movie before that, it's showing that there was a big wealth disparity and it only widened in the 1800s. And there's incredible works in sceneries and buildings and attitude and dialogue, and not even that, but even the characters feel like they come straight from the time. Each one has a brilliant accent and is doing an incredible job with, how they're doing their work. They look straight out of the actual time period, which is incredible. And later in the film, when he meets the Dodger, which is essentially a guy who stalks other people and steals a lot, they see a huge street in the poor area of town in one of the urbanized cities, and it's cramped, and there's a bunch of people everywhere throughout the streets. It's dirty, there's fights, there's businesses, there's buildings close together, and bridges, and women and men all around, and it was just chaotic. And that was perfect, because that is exactly how the streets in the early to late 1800s looked. There was no organization, because urbanization took away everything that could have even constituted as normal during that time. It was incredible. And at the time the book was written, it was made by the guy who was also made during the time. It wasn't embellished or anything like that. In fact, they had heavy slang throughout the entire movie that relates to the time period. Consistently, all of the thieves in the guild under Fagin were all people who used the word green to describe Oliver Twist. In fact, I didn't even know this slang, and I'm really interested in old slang. And I searched it up. Nothing came up, obviously, because this guy uses slang that's not really used anymore, like the traps for the police, green for people who are uptight, and more like that. I really enjoyed seeing this film use incredible dialogue options, like to keep you hooked, but also to keep you understanding. Like they used a bunch of slang, but you still understand the message of what people are trying to say, which is incredible because you have to get the dialogue across somehow, right? So I really like how this was done. And that was essentially my whole thing. This is not based on anybody who's real, so it's not going to be historically accurate to a person. And I believe the events are also not accurate because they're not any historical events. This entire film is fictitious, that it's based in a place in history. And if you wanted to, watch the film for historical purposes, you would not get a good gauge of it. It's definitely perfect towards if you want to see what the time was like to live there. Yes, that's what it was. If you were rich, you were rich. If you're poor, you stayed that way. Yada, yada, yada. The language, oh man, the accuracy of this film baffled me. It was incredible. There was costuming and the language, culture, like the way that people said things, the accents, the buildings, the set. Oh man, I cannot compliment this enough for everything it did. And not only that, they did change a little bit at the end, where he was like, Fagin, you were kind to me. And I'm not even mad they changed it from the book. That scene was impactful. And in fact, if I was a different person, I probably would have shed a tear at the end of this film. So yeah, that's Oliver Twist 2005. I suggest you watch it. It's really good. Please, guys. It's so amazing. Okay, last movie. Now this one is really nice. I really recommend it. And it's called The Boy in the Striped Pajamas. This movie is also really good. This one, I believe there's only one movie called The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, but you'll have to correct me on that, so I'm not going to say the date. But this movie is really, really, really good. As is the same as this other movie that I was going to watch, but I didn't watch it, and I'm probably going to watch it with my parents, and it's called All Quiet on the Western Front. I really wanted to watch that first, but The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, I wanted to watch that because it's about the Holocaust, and I believe that deserves just as much as like everything else, really. But I believe that deserves a lot of coverage because it's a very sad, sad topic. Setting is good. I think the setting is great. There is a lot of things that I could have, critiqued throughout the movie. Like there was a juxtaposition in clothing at the time and the clothing that they were wearing. Dialogue sometimes kind of etched out, and sometimes I believe that they paced a little wrong. But that's just all personal preferences. All of the movie was quite accurate, and I really liked that. I really did. Maybe not to the book because the book itself, I've heard a lot of about this movie from my teacher. Hello, Miss Shane, I love you. I learned a lot of it from the teacher from secondhand listening because someone else was also doing this movie, and it is not very accurate to the book because the book has certain things that it does that you cannot do in a movie. You can try, and it's gonna still be really hard to pull it off, and you probably could, but it's very, very almost impossible to pull it off in a movie. Where like in the first few scenes when the father comes home and the child sees him, it looks like it's the father in the book because that's all you know because it's in the child's perspective. But in the movie, it looks obviously like it's a Nazi soldier. So it's not always accurate, but that's almost sometimes out of their control. Now, this movie is incredibly sad. It goes over this boy's time in the Holocaust and how he survived. And, I mean, I don't want to go into detail about everything, but the Holocaust is always a touchy subject, so I'm not going to speak about historical accuracy about the killings of massive amount of people. That's not on my place to say. But it is my place to say how everything played out. And I think that the movie does an incredible, amazing job at portraying fear and sadness and the disparity of the Holocaust. It was horrible. I liked the film a lot, and I do recommend it to a bunch of people. So let's go over these questions. I do believe this film is a sort of good source of history. It's a story of a person in the time, so therefore it's basically a secondhand experience because we're watching it in movie form. I still suggest reading the book because that is a genuine autobiography, and the book is so much better than the movie. It's genuinely a source, but the movie was good. I liked it. Were there any characters based on real people? Yes, the real person was historically accurate to the person. There are some parts definitely embellished for the story that from the book aren't accurate, but overall, they did a kind of good job, and I liked it. I keep saying that, but it's true, I did like it. They did a good job. Were there any real events that happened and were they historically accurate? There were real events and they were sort of historically accurate. I mean, of course, they couldn't add everything, otherwise the movie never would have aired, but it was incredibly sad to see anything happen in that movie about the Holocaust. The Holocaust is, I don't know why, but it really gets me. It makes me feel sad. And actually, I take that back. I do know why. It's a sad event. It's a sad time in history, and I really wish it never happened. But I'm glad that I'm affected by it because therefore I know that there's something wrong that happened here. Overall, I think that language, costuming, and culture all had things that felt right and looked sort of good. There's some critiques I could give, but those are really small things, like in Les Miserables, where I like about the switchblade or the pencil sharpener, about all of that. There's only small things that I could find that I really thought were not really good to the time period. That's it. It's very accurate. I think this film was mostly made for entertainment purposes and not for historical period, but the original intention of the book was for historical period. You can kind of see throughout the film that parts of the story are made so there is an inspirational storyline, like those dog films where the dog dies. Those films are made for entertainment purposes, for sure. And this movie kind of gave me that vibe that it was kind of like the dog films. which I don't know how to feel about that, but yeah, that's what happened. So yeah, that's my evaluation on the 4 movies. I think, personally, that each movie had its own, the last 3 movies had their own ups and downs. The first one had only downs, and it kept surprising me how low it could go. So, come on guys, be present when you say that a movie is good, because I had to psychoanalyze movies for around, I don't know, like 20 hours, because I was sitting in that chair, you can't see it, but this chair on my dining table for like 2 whole days, sat, analyzing, researching, scripting, and getting here. In fact, the script I entirely scrapped because there were parts of it I wasn't happy with, so this whole time, I'm free-versing. Like, I didn't have a script. It's probably very obvious. But, yeah, this project was really fun, and I enjoyed it, and I thought watching all these movies were great. So I recommend the same thing. Find 4 historical movies in history that you think are really awesome, and talk about them in the comments. Or maybe, if I missed a movie that I was going to go over, in fact, you should probably, try and look for it. Try and look for a movie that's really good. Like, the first movie, the other one that I wasn't going to watch that was the same as The Messenger Joan of Arc is called The Black Plague, or Black Death, something like that. And that was a movie I didn't watch for that time period. Then next one was, what was it? So that was the Dark Period, Scientific Revolution. I think I was going to watch The Girl with a Pearl Earring, and that was in 2003. That one's also really good. I was also going to watch, man, there's so many on this list that I was going to watch. Like, I was going to watch, Waterloo in 1770, and 1770 is crazy. 1970, and there's a bunch of different stuff on here that's pretty cool, like Napoleon and Josephine, A Love Story, 1987. Pride and Prejudice was definitely another one I wanted to watch. That one's really good. In fact, I probably should have done that one. But I do not take it back in trying to find new movies to watch. And Les Miserables, I don't know how to say it, is a really good movie. So let's just get with it. So there's also The Girl with the, I already said that. The Madness of King George, 1994. That was also something I wanted to watch. All of this stuff. Then it's Period 3, which is I watched Oliver Twist, but what I also wanted to watch was Suffrage in 2015. I also wanted to watch Stalin, 1992. And all this other stuff's just so good. Like, all of these things I could have watched. And then there's Modern Times. I was going to watch All Quiet on the Western Front. I wanted to watch Lawrence of Arabia. I wanted to watch Hotel Rwanda. I wanted to watch Valkyrie, The Iron Lady, Courier, The King's Speech, All Quiet on the Western Front. I think I already said that. And I watched The Boy in Striped Pajamas. I wanted to watch The Book Thief, The African Queen, The Wipers Times, Au revoir, Les Enfants, all of that. That sounded amazing. So I really recommend finding a movie from each time period and rating it yourself, because this was a really fun thing. And when I got to nitpick the first movie, I had way too much fun going into each individual detail. Be like, you got Joan of Arc so wrong. I sound like a parent when I say that, but I swear to you guys, it's really, really fun. And I enjoyed this a lot. I think that this project should be used every year, and it probably has been for AP Euro, for at least my class. And I support using it for every year. Every class. It's really fun, gets you into it, and makes you remember the stuff in this class. It's very memorable. And it makes you look at things differently too, especially about films and all that. Sorry for having a black screen this whole time. Mostly black. I have this little sprite going on the screen. By the way, I only had 5 sprites. I had drawn them one day in the middle of the school year, and I was like, I should use this for a video sometime, because I always wanted to start a YouTube channel, and I put into use for this, so nice job me for drawing them. I only have 5 emotions in this, so, don't hurt me. I'm just a little British boy. Anyways, this was an amazing project. Get to it, do it yourself, and I'm sorry for the lack of emotion, guys. That's not on me, that was on previous me, past me. Gone past me, not present me. Alright, bye guys, thanks for watching. Boop. No, wrong button. Boop.